Welcome, everybody. Welcome, welcome. We are going to tonight. Oh, and there's Hillel. We're going to tonight. It's me and Hillel tonight, and we're going to take you through the Seder. That's what we're going to do in short, is take you through the Seder. Now, Passover is the most important Jewish holiday. It just is. It's the holiday that founds our entire, tradition, religion, and everything flows forth from Passover. And the Seder night is the most, I think, still the most observed Jewish ritual. It's really right at the center, right at the core. And we could just talk about, therefore, we could talk about Judaism. We could talk about everything in Judaism. We talk about the entire book of Exodus. We talk about the entire Torah. Talk about the entire history of the Jewish people. We could do all of that. And that's what these weeks leading up to Passover are meant to do to us, to put us into that back to basics mindset. But when it comes to this thing that we're doing tonight, we're not going to survey the entire story. We're not going to survey the entire book of Exodus. We're not going to survey all of Jewish history. We're going to use this very succinct, compact code, and it's really a code that the rabbis gave us, and they called it a Seder. And Seder means order, and they wanted to give us like a 15 steps in order. That's the Seder. That was a word that mattered a lot to the rabbis. In fact, another place that word is prominently used is to describe the Talmud itself. Shisha Sidrei Mishnah, the 6 orders of the Talmud. The rabbis were trying to systematize a civilization that they were worried was getting lost, and that had become vast and wild, and they were trying to put it in order. And so when it comes to Passover, the night of Passover, this maybe most important night of the Jewish year, they wanted to give, they didn't expect us to do what they were doing and put the entire tradition into their minds and try to systematize it. They wanted to give us just a brief little cheat sheet for getting through this evening. And the cheat sheet is the Seder, the order, and it's 15 steps. And I just want to say that what we're going to do tonight is move through these 15 steps. And in order to lead a Seder, that's basically all you have to do, is move through these 15 steps. Okay, so it's going to be pretty straightforward. We're going to try to just give you the basics, and along the way, Hillel will elevate us a little bit with sound. I'm going to do the talking, and he'll do the music. But on that note, on the note of sound, I want to just frame a little bit more than just telling you, oh, there are 15 steps and you have to learn them. Just a little bit more why there are 15 steps. Because I just put this together myself recently, and it's actually kind of mind-blowing when you see it. So I want to start in a strange place just for a few minutes at the outset here, to give us some sense of what this Seder is all about, what this order is all about. And the strange place that I want to start in is in the Mishnah, that first rabbinic code, the Mishnah, which is put together in the 2nd century of the Common Era, and take you to one of the most beautiful teachings in the Mishnah. And it's not about Passover, it's about Sukkot. So why am I starting with Sukkot? You'll see in a second. So this is one of the most beautiful teachings in the Mishnah. And the rabbis say that on Sukkot, there was a festival. And it was a festival in the middle of Sukkot that was so joyous, you've never seen anything like it in your life. In fact, they say, if you haven't seen the festival of Sukkot, you never saw true happiness in your life. And this is what true happiness looks like, according to the rabbis. And I have a source sheet for you, so maybe I'll share that first. True happiness, according to the rabbis, was this: the saints and the men of great deeds would dance before the people with flaming torches in their hands, and they would sing out words of song and praise. Okay, they're dancing. They're torches in hand. It's like, Burning Man. And the Levites would play on lyres and harps, cymbals, and trumpets, and countless other musical instruments. Okay, and the music is coming in. Hillel's going to help us with that tonight. And the Levites would stand upon now this is why I'm sharing this particular Mishnah. And the Levites would stand upon the 15 stairs that descend from the Israelites' courtyard to the women's courtyard. There were different levels in the temple courtyards, but there were 15 stairs that led up to the temple. And those 15 stairs correspond to the 15 songs of ascents in the Psalms. Now that's interesting. And they would stand there with their musical instruments and sing. Okay, so there are 15 stairs that lead up to the temple. And the rabbis teach that those 15 stairs correspond to Shir Hamalot. There are 15 psalms that begin Shir Hamalot, from Psalm 120 to Psalm 135. Shir Hamalot literally means a song of ascents. So Ma'alot can mean stairs, but it also can just mean ascents, ascensions. And I think the reason that they make this connection is because in one of the Shir Hamalot, we know Shir Hamalot because we sing one of them before we bless after a meal. Shir Hamalot, right? Same beginning. But in one of them, it says, Shir Hamalot, a song of ascents, Le David, of David, Samachti, I rejoiced when they said to me, we are Beit Adonai Nelech, we're going to the house of the eternal. So maybe that's the connection. But whatever it is, there are 15 steps up the temple and 15 songs of ascents. And why am I talking about this tonight? Why am I mentioning this before we go through the Seder? Well, if you've been paying attention, you probably noted that there's at least one connection, because how many parts to the Seder were there? There were 15. Okay, very cute, Rabbi Kasher. So now you want to say that that's connected too? Well, I was convinced this year that it is indeed connected, that those 15 steps of the Seder are meant to correspond to the 15 steps that led up to the temple and are meant to correspond to the psalms that are supposed to elevate us on the way there. And the proof text for that is none other than one of the Seder favorites, Dayenu. Right? You remember Dayenu, Ilu Hotzi Hotzianu. Hillel is going to teach us a different version of it tonight. But there's, if you had only taken us out of Egypt and not done anything else, that would have been enough. And if you had done other things, that would have been, you know how Dayenu goes. Well, did you know that Dayenu actually also has, you guessed it, 15 steps? And not only that, but Dayenu starts with this interesting language. How many levels of goodness did God bestow upon us? Kama ma'alot tovot lemakom aleinu. Same language here. Same language for stairs, ma'alot. Same language for ascension, ma'alot. And same language for all of the levels that God poured upon us. And it's a little tricky here, right? Because the first verse is 1 and 2, taken us out of Egypt and rendered judgments upon them. But if you scroll through, there are indeed 15 things that God laid upon us that we are thanking God for. So you see, the Seder has been designed 15 steps to take us back up to the temple, take us back up to God, to thank God for what God has done for us. And that's the reason that the Seder is not just given to us as a sync code, but broken up in these 15 parts so that we might, as we move through the Seder, be ascending back up to the temple, which we no longer have, but we are recreating in our meal. So that 15-step Seder is the code to it all, both as a matter of practical order and spiritually speaks to the elevation that we're trying to achieve over the course of the evening. So with that said, as just a sort of framework for what we're doing, I want to hand it over to Hillel, because there are some cutesy, it is important to remember the 15 steps, but there are some cutesy ways to do it, like Kadesh, Urchatz, Karp. But thank God we have Hillel in our community and don't have to rely on such cutenesses. So with that, I turn it over to Hillel for our first song of the evening.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Kasher. That's very interesting indeed. I'd never heard that or thought of that. I love hearing that. In fact, not everybody is aware that the Tehillim, or the Psalms, actually are songs. This was like a psalmody. These were written not as poems. You usually hear them today, I think, as people read them to be inspired by the words, but they were really part of like a hymnal book that people had, not just in Jerusalem, but in different communities that sprang up all throughout ancient Israel, where people started to worship even before the temple was destroyed. So song was also always an intimate part of prayer, even during the time of the temple. And I think for me, it's really the highlight of the Seder. So this is probably the prettiest melody I've ever heard for a table of contents. And this is where we, in fact, list these 15 steps. And some of the melodies I'm going to teach tonight are not the traditional Ashkenazic ones. These are Salonican, a region in Greece where some of the Sephardic Jews who were exiled from Spain during the Inquisition made their wanderings and wound up there. And I think you're going to love this. I certainly do.
I'm so grateful to have you here, Hillel, especially because, I mean, you're going to do all of the good stuff tonight. Like every time we go back to Hillel, it's going to be like, and I'm going to do all of the boring stuff. By which I mean to say that, like I got to shove this information into you. I'm happily doing the boring stuff tonight, which is that I'm going to just try to give us all the information we need, just the very basics to move through the Seder and know what each of these pieces are. So let's start moving. And if there are, we'll take some time for questions at the end, but I'm going to try to just sort of move us through the Seder and not belabor any one of these 15 steps too greatly. So Kadesh Urchatz, Karpasya Chatz, right? That you learn the song, you get it in your head, you now have like this code. So one by one, Kadesh. Kadesh is the first step in the Seder, and it's just Kiddush. It's just a way of saying you make Kiddush. So there are 4 cups of the wine at the Seder, and you will start by filling the first cup of wine. The things to note here in this first pouring of wine is that the customs of Passover are inviting us to be leisurely, regal in our enjoyment of the meal, and so everybody's glass is filled by someone else, right? So that you have the feeling of being waited on. And this is one of the strangest features of the Seder, is that you're supposed to drink your wine while leaning to the left. And that's also supposed to be like an enjoyable, luxurious thing to do. Although it never really feels that way. You're always kind of like leaning over it. But I think it is meant to evoke one of those like, what do you call those sitting couches? What's it called? Reclining couch. But anyway, you're drinking and leaning to the left. I don't know. And why to the left? Some of the commentaries say, oh, you choke if you do it to the right. None of that makes any sense to me, but that is the custom. In terms of the Kiddush itself, just like on Shabbat, we make a blessing over wine to begin the meal. We do the same thing on Passover, but it's a little tricky. We're not going to read through the whole thing, but I just want to tell you the pieces to watch out for. Our Seder this year begins on Friday evening. And if it is Friday evening, you begin with Shabbat. So on Friday evening, you'll start it's actually more confusing when it's not Friday evening, because you have to scroll through, or not really scroll, right? But like move through your Haggadah and start here. But on Friday evening, you say the Shabbat part. Then on as they say on Passover, on all other nights, you begin here, and there's a special Kiddush for Passover. And then, so Friday night, you say this and this. Saturday night, you start here, but Saturday night, you add something else. On Saturday night, you have to say Havdalah because it is the end of Shabbat, even though you're beginning the second night of Passover. And so that blessing here, this is the Havdalah blessing, which you say at the table over the cup of wine. And you've lit some candles also, right? So you pass the flame from one candle to another. So you can say all of these blessings there at the table, and it ends with this beautiful blessing, Hamavdil ben Kodesh laKodesh. Blessed are you, O Lord, who distinguishes between the holy and the other holy, between the holy of Shabbat and the holy of Passover. And then on both nights, we end with a Shechianu. Shechianu v'kimanu v'yigianu lazman hazeh. Okay, on both nights, because we who observe 2 days of Yom Tov always treat the second one like it is the first one, because the whole idea of the 2 days is that, oh, we're not sure if it's this day or this day, okay? For another discussion, but we say the full Shechianu both nights, okay? But on Friday night, one edition, on Saturday night, another edition. You'll have to keep note of both of them this year, okay? Kadesh Urchatz. What is Urchatz? The word Urchatz means washing. So after Kiddush, we know we wash our hands. And usually on Shabbat, we wash our hands, make a blessing, don't say anything until we break bread. But on Passover, we do a washing, but we don't say a blessing and we don't make bread. We don't break bread. We just do an opening washing. There will be 2 washings, actually 2 full steps of the Seder are washing steps. Now, why do we say this washing? Why do we wash our hands this time if we're going to wash it later before we eat bread? Well, there's no real answer to the question, and this takes us into one of the features of the Passover Seder, of Passover altogether, which is that we do weird things on purpose in order to provoke questions, right? So there's all kinds of traditions of, grabbing away the tablecloth and all kinds of surprises so that the whole thing is to prompt the kids to ask, why is this night different from all other nights? So the first intentionally weird thing we do is Urchatz, a washing of hands without a blessing. And again, we wash each other's hands. So sometimes some people come around and wash, or sometimes you just wash each other's hands, but the water is brought to the table. So that's Kadesh Urchatz. Okay, the next step, Kadesh Urchatz, Karpas. Karpas is the first thing we'll eat. Oh, I guess we've eaten wine. We've drank wine, but this is the first thing that we will eat, and it is the vegetable. In fact, nobody's quite sure what the word karpas means. It seems Greek, and we're not sure what vegetable to use. Sometimes people use parsley, sometimes people use celery, sometimes people use a potato. But the tradition is to dip it in salt water or in vinegar, and we make a blessing over the vegetable. Now, why do we eat a vegetable? Well, again, nobody knows for sure. There's all kinds of layers of interpretation. It symbolizes spring and new growth. Maybe we just need a little bite before we get started. But my favorite explanation is that this dipping into the salt water is meant to evoke the dipping of Joseph's tunic into blood, which the scheme of his brothers, which as this interpretation goes, began the descent into Egypt. So this is like we're beginning the descent into Egypt symbol. But I don't know if that's true. All I know for the purposes of tonight is that you take a vegetable, dip it in salt water, and you eat the vegetable and make the blessing that you would make over a vegetable, which is Borei Pri Ha'adama. Blessed are you, Lord God, ruler of the universe, who creates the fruit of the earth. Okay, so that's 3 steps in: Kadesh, Urchatz, Karpas, and then the next one is Yachatz. Yachatz means the splitting or the breaking. Like Chetzi is half, so this is the halving of the middle matzah. There are 3 matzahs. Traditionally, we take 3 matzahs. The way on Passover we would take 2 loaves. On Shabbat we would take 2 loaves. On Passover we take 3 matzahs, and again, all kinds of symbolism. Like, is it the 3 forefathers? And once it's broken, does it represent now 4 pieces, the 4 matriarchs? Lots of symbolism suggested, but just for the how-to purpose, You have 3 pieces of matzah. You break the middle one. And now this is important. You take the larger piece of the middle one and you go hide it. And that becomes the afikomen. We'll talk about that more later. But the bigger piece of the middle matzah is the afikomen, gets hidden. The littler piece goes back in the middle, and you now have done yachatz. No blessing or anything like that. Yachatz is just the breaking of the middle matzah so that you can use part of it as the afikomen. Again, we'll talk about what the afikomen is later. Okay, now you have 2 whole pieces of matzah and 1 broken piece of matzah. And there is, now that takes us to the next 2 steps, which are motzi, which should sound familiar, and then matzah. So motz, they both have blessings. One of them is the blessing you're going to say on every holiday meal, which is hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Oh, where's motzi and matzah? I skipped motzi and matzah? Oh, sorry, my prep is, okay. That's just a mistake on my part. I just didn't put that in. Okay, the blessing over motzi is hamotzi lechem min haaretz. The blessing over the bread that we say every week, and we say that with all 3 pieces in our hands, and then we drop the lower piece and say Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al achilat matzah. A special blessing over eating matzah. Why are we holding all 3 pieces when we say hamotzi lechem min haaretz? It is to have 2 full loaves like we do whenever we say hamotzi. Why do we drop 1 piece when we say al achilat matzah? So that we are making a separate blessing on the matzah on a different commandment, which is the commandment of eating matzah. Okay, where are we? I'm like a little tangled up here. Yatsa. Okay, so I just skipped motzi, matzah, and oh no, I didn't. No, I didn't. I'm not stupid. I'm just tech stupid. Okay, so that's good. I don't mind being tech stupid. All right, I just have them out of place here, and I don't know why. But there's motzi and matzah, okay. And I ran ahead. Okay, so I ran ahead because the motzi and matzah are later in the Seder. Okay, so my mistake here. After yachatz, I'm just confused because I'm racing ahead. But after yachatz, we come to the most important part of the Seder, which is Maggid. Okay, after yachatz comes Maggid, and Maggid is really the central event in the Seder. Okay, Maggid is the central point of the Seder, which is the telling of the story. The telling of the story of you. Now, we always say in my family, just open the Torah, start talking. Don't even open the Torah, just start talking. And I want to give you all permission to not use the Haggadah for Maggid. Just start talking and you will have done it. But of course, the Haggadah has all kinds of classics, all kinds of greatest hits. And so I'm just going to give you some of those greatest hits, and then I'm going to turn it back over to Hillel. Okay, so what are some of the most important parts of the Maggid section? The opening, Halach Ma'anya, is a very famous statement of gratitude. This is the bread of affliction. It says that our ancestors ate in the land of Egypt. Let all who are hungry come and eat. And so it starts the Seder both recognizing our own suffering, but bringing us directly into the theme of Passover, which is using our own suffering to be compassionate when we see the suffering of others. So welcoming all those who are hungry to our table. Okay, the 4 questions, right? Classic, probably the most classic part of the Seder. The plagues, counting out the plagues and taking a drop of wine from our cup for each of the plagues. Now, I've listed all the plagues here. There's also an abbreviation for the plagues that classically we name all the plagues, and then we name the abbreviation which helps us to remember the plagues, although I can't say it really helps me to remember the plagues, but the abbreviation is Datzach Adash Ba'achav, then Dayenu, and then finally, the Rabban Gamliel famously says that unless you explain these 3 symbolic foods, you have not done your job at the Seder, and those 3 symbolic foods are the paschal lamb, the paschal offering, the matzah, and the maror, the matzah and the bitter herb. So some kind of explaining what these three things is requisite to completing the Maggid section of the Seder. And then at the end of the Maggid section of the Seder, we drink the second cup of wine. Okay, I can't believe I just said the Seder out of order in a how to lead a Seder class, but that is what I did. I just like skipped ahead myself. But okay, so the first 5 steps are Kadesh, Karpas, Yachatz, Maggid. Okay, that's the first 5. And speaking of Maggid, it's also a place where some of the classic songs of the Seder arise. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Hillel.
Thank you. So Baruch HaMakom is one of the pieces that happens right at the beginning of this, right? We talk about the 4 sons. And I had written this melody with the Haggadah in mind, but I liked the melody and was feeling bummed that it was just something that could be done once a year until it was explained to me that in the Sephardic Shabbat Sidur, they sing this prayer on Shabbat right as the Torah is taken out of the ark, as it's paraded around the room. And so that's kind of become our custom at Ikar. But anyway, you'll hear God referred to as HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Holy One, blessed be He, a lot in the Seder. That was one of the common names at the time that this was compiled in the Mishnah. The other name that's used less so in the Haggadah, but more in the Mishnah, is Hamakom, and that's short for Hamakom Baruch Hu, apropos of what Rabbi Kasher is talking about, centric to the 15 ma'alot, the steps in the temple. Hamakom refers to he who dwells in the holy place on the hill. That's one of the names we have for God. So this is Baruch HaMakom that you've heard on Shabbat. Now, if I may, we can go to the Dayenu Rabbi Kasher spoke about. So this is another Salonican melody from Greece, from the Ladino tradition. And this one doesn't go through all 15, but I think when we sing the kiddie melody, anyway, we skip around a lot, don't we? We don't do those middle parts. So anyway, it's going to go a bit out of order if you're following along. But the nice thing about this one is it actually starts off with the line that Rabbi Kasher discussed earlier, Kama ma'alot tovot lamakom aleinu. How many stages of wonders has the makom that we just talked about, has the Kadosh Baruch Hu, the Holy One, blessed He, bestowed upon us. Kama ma'alot tovot lamakom aleinu hotzianu mitzrayim v'lo asa bahem shefatim
gosh, I already have like FOMO for not being at Hillel's Seder. Now I'm gonna feel like such a loser. I'm like, hey, let's see.
We do that
But
one
the
too,
truth
though.
is,
We do
that
too.
one's good too, right?
It's a classic. It's the best.
It's a classic. It's a classic,
Yeah.
and well, it's a good moment to, speaking of the bouncy energy of that tune, to mention that one of the great customs that Ashkenazim are starting to borrow from Sephardic lands, which is the beating of one another with we use green onions in my house, right? Like during Dayenu, we beat each other with as if we're fair. I don't even know where that comes from. Maybe some of our Sephardic friends can help us out. But that's a great moment, and there are many great moments in Maggid. And what we're doing tonight, in some ways, is like racing through the whole Seder. But the truth is, Maggid is the most important part. Telling the story is the most important part of the whole evening. If you can do it with children present, all the more so. There's a lot in there. And as I said, anything from just having a 1 hour conversation to reading every juicy part of the Haggadah, that's all of those are wonderful versions of Maggid. Okay, so there we are, and we have done it. We have told the story of leaving Egypt, the foundational story of our people. And now the meal begins. I see where my messy brain got lost, right? Because I did yachatz and I started to explain the breaking of the matzah and then just raced ahead to the matzah. But after breaking the matzah, we pause and then tell the story and then go back, and after Maggid start the meal again, right? We've made the kiddush, but really it has been as if this whole thing has just been one long kiddush, and you really feel that because at the end of Maggid, we drink the second cup of wine. Then comes the sixth step, is the second hand washing. And this is the real hand washing. So because it's about to precede the eating of the bread or the matzah, and so it has a blessing. So the sixth step of the Seder is rachza. Remember, the second step was urchatz. The sixth is rachza, same root there of washing. So this is the second washing, and it contains a blessing that will be familiar to those who do this on Friday nights. Asher kiddushanu v'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al netilat yadayim, on the washing of the hands. Okay. Then comes motzi and matzah, which I raced ahead to earlier, but they are the seventh and eighth steps in the Seder. And as I said, I already explained this. So picking up all three matzot from motzi, so that you have the two whole loaves for hamotzi lechem min haaretz, dropping the bottom matzah so that you're using a different object or a different sort of configuration of the object to make the special blessing over matzah. Asher kiddushanu mitzvotav v'tzivanu al achilat matzah. The tradition is to eat an egg's worth volume of matzah. Not everybody does that, but it can be fun to try and bring your water, though. You don't want to choke, but you can be fun to try and stuff an egg's worth of matzah down your throat. In olden times, the tradition says we would also be eating the paschal sacrifice, the lamb here, but we don't do that anymore because we don't have a temple. So those three symbolic foods that I said we were gonna have to cover by the end of Maggid, right? These three symbolic foods, we're eating them right up at the beginning of the meal. We first eat matzah, then we would eat lamb, but there's no longer a temple. We're not making a paschal sacrifice. So instead we move to maror, the bitter herb, maybe the most classically evocative food of the Seder, eating the bitter herb, and there's a blessing that you say, al achilat maror, asher kiddushanu mitzvotav v'tzivanu al achilat maror. And here you're supposed to eat at least an olive's worth amount of maror. And different traditions around maror, different traditions. Some people even eat lettuce for maror because it's kind of bitter. But I must say, I still remember my father, the shaving of the horseradish, of the raw horseradish. And I just remember being a kid at the table and seeing these old men eating and then almost vomiting and crying. And now that's a Jewish holiday. So anyway, that's the eating of maror, which is, of course, one of the classic foods of the Seder. Now, if you've been following these last steps, you have matzah and maror, and in olden times there was also Pesach, the lamb itself. So the 10th step of the Seder is korech, which literally means like a sandwich or a wrap. I think it's probably best described in the language of today as a wrap. And that is because Hillel and Shammai, not our Hillel, but Hillel the elder, not Hillel the younger. Hillel and Shammai were always fighting over things, and Shammai held that you should eat each food separately and focus on each food separately, but Hillel held that you should eat them all together. And there's an interesting kind of philosophical, experiential debate there over whether all of the sensations of Passover should be experienced at once, or whether we need to focus on the bitterness, the redemption, the haste in 3 separate moments. But suffice it to say, Hillel's position is that you experience them all at once. And that is why you make a little sandwich where you wrap the matzah and maror together. He would eat them with the lamb, but we usually put a little charoset in there just to like gel up the sandwich. And you put a little maror and a little charoset together between 2 pieces of matzah. And there's a little saying. It's not a blessing, but it's a saying. Zecher lemikdash kehillel. This is in memory of the temple and what we would do according to Hillel when the temple existed. It's funny to say Hillel with Hillel right here, but he would wrap the matzah and maror and eat them together in order to fulfill. He was reading a particular phrasing in the book of Numbers, al matzot umarorim yochluhu. You should eat them together upon matzot and marorim. That is the Paschal offering. Okay, so that's 10 steps, 10 out of 15. We're almost done. And the next step is easy because once you've eaten the wrap, you've already started your eating, right? You had the wine early on, you had the vegetable even early on, then you got to the matzah, you're eating matzah now, you eat a little maror, you make yourself a little sandwich, and then the next step, and it's a whole step, and it's everybody's favorite step in the Seder, shulchan orech, which means the laid out table, which is just the meal itself. Everything kind of, all of the reading and the singing goes away and people just, stuff themselves in classic Jewish fashion. And that is one of the steps of the Seder, okay? So just have a meal, enjoy yourselves. Now, I would say, I don't know if it's a custom or a leniency or a laziness, but many people just stop here. That's it. You've never seen steps 1 through 15 of the Seder before in your life. Then I have a surprise for you. There are more steps after Shulchan Aruch. Don't worry, I've also fallen asleep at the table. You're cups of wine in now. I get it. But there are 5 more steps. And the next step after Shulchan Aruch is safun. Safun means the hidden thing. What has been hidden? We noted that earlier, the afikomen, that larger piece of the middle matzah. So safun is the eating of the afikomen, but the tradition has developed to hide the afikomen, and there's all kinds of rituals around it, but here's how it worked in my family. Someone hides the afikomen, and then the kids go around and look for the afikomen, and then when they find the afikomen, they bring it back to whoever is running the Seder, and they say, I will give you back this afikomen if you agree to buy me a PlayStation. And there's like haggling. I'm not going to buy a PlayStation. I'll buy you a game for a PlayStation. No. You have to buy me 3 games for a PlayStation. I mean, this would really, I don't know. I don't know if this is kosher exactly, but this is how it went down in my family. And the reason for that little ritual, other than, again, the constant desire to get kids involved, is because there's an idea that you have to eat the afikomen before the Seder ends. Some would say before midnight, although many traditions go later than midnight, but you want the last thing you eat to be a piece of the Paschal lamb. The afikomen is not the Paschal lamb, it's a little piece of matzah, but it's in memory of that Paschal lamb, and so it has value to it, and everybody at the table is supposed to eat, this time just an olive size, but a piece of the afikomen. So you distribute the afikomen, and that is theoretically the last thing you're eating that evening, and it has to be done, and that's why all of the hiding and finding and bartering takes place around safun. But that's the 11th step of the Seder. And as we go forward, it's like less and less people at the table. But barech is one of the steps of the Seder, and that's just the Birkat HaMazon, the blessing after the meal. What's significant about Birkat HaMazon here? It's just a regular Birkat HaMazon. What's significant is that there is a 3rd cup of wine. We say the Birkat HaMazon, the blessing after the meal, over the 3rd cup of wine. And all of these cups of wine are poured by someone else. And all of these cups of wine are drunk to the left side, lean to the left. Okay, so that's Barech. And then the last two steps of the Seder are interesting. One of them is Hallel. Now, what's Hallel doing here? I was like, I just ate a meal. Leave me alone already. But we actually recite a full Hallel, and not just a full, but even more than full, because it's an unusual Hallel that we recite at the meal. Now, that's weird. Now, Hallel on a holiday is not weird. But this Hallel is unusual for all kinds of reasons. First of all, we usually only say Hallel during the day. And here we're saying it at night. We usually recite Hallel standing, and here we're saying Hallel sitting. It's a longer Hallel than we usually say. But the strangest thing of all is that we started saying it during Maggid. If you go back and look at Maggid, you'll see that we began saying Hallel already, and this sort of picks up on, so it's a little messy. But after we've blessed, we continue saying Hallel. And I would say that this is, if you want to prove that you're a hardcore Jew, this is the step for you, number 14. I mean, if anything is skipped at the Seder, it's like Hallel now. So this is your year. Take step 14 and really own it and say, I am a hardcore Jew. I am really doing this thing this year. Okay, if you want to be a hardcore Jew. Okay. That's Hallel. I said there are some unusual things there. And after the Hallel, we drink the fourth cup of wine, leaning to the left as always. Finally, and this is the last step in the Seder, we're almost done here. The last step of the Seder is Nirtzah, which is the conclusion of the Seder. And there are some classic kind of incantation, phrasing, closing statements of the Seder. We have done the Seder, we did it according to law, and God is so great, please, little flourishing language. And then the famous last line of the Seder is Lashana haba b'Yerushalayim habnuya. Next year, may we do all of this in the rebuilt Jerusalem, which was the last step of the Seder was, again, I told you, the whole thing is a kind of walking back up to the temple, the 15 steps up to the temple. And so we close the Seder with a desire that maybe next year we'll actually eat that Paschal lamb. Or, maybe it'll be an impossible or beyond lamb. But whatever it is, next year we'll actually be back doing this as we should in the temple courtyard and returning to make pilgrimage, which Passover originally was. So that is the end of the Seder. And then comes, then you're either like, drunk or talking to your friends or whatever. But many people would say this is the best part of the Seder. This is the Hillel part of the Seder, where we just launch into an evening of song. And so, Chasal Seder Pesach, I have done my job for tonight. We'll take some questions after the singing, but I turn the rest of our time over to Hillel for whatever songs he might teach us that we would be singing after those 15 steps of the Seder.
Thank you, Senator, for ceding your time to me now. So, yeah, this is kind of Perlstein before Swinburne, because this is the best part of the Seder, I think. This is some of the most beautiful music when the war of attrition has ended and only the diehards are left. But I love this. This is when we really start banging on the table. And, when you're Ashkenazic, in our community, we excise a lot about the Mashiach, the Messiah, from most of our year. We take it out of the Kaddish, and the Orthodox people, the Sephardim, have it there. V'ikarev Mashiach, they usually say, but he bring the Messiah closer. But this is one time during the year where I think you kind of start to feel the presence and you yearn for at least something redemptive, and you start to feel that when you've been through all these steps, you do start to feel like you're getting higher, don't you, Rabbi Kasher? Whether it's the wine or the investment of the time or the food or the merriment, whatever it is, we do start to feel some special, like the neshama yetera, like that extra little spirit that we have, and we sing about the Mashiach specifically, and we have Elijah's cup. But anyway, this is the part where I think you feel a presence that you don't feel during the rest of the Seder. Anyway, a lot of the closing songs, people may not realize, were not written for the Haggadah. They were just collections of songs that, just like on Shabbos, you throw together some songs, mirot, and they're sung. These traditionally were, many of them, Chad Gadya, and others at the end were not written for the Haggadah, but they became part of the Haggadah. And they're great because especially when you're inebriated, most of them have some kind of a structure that's easy, right? They're either acrostics, like the Adir, who like alphabetically organized for people who didn't really own books. Most of this had to be known by heart, and it's easy to do it that way. Or it's something where there's a chronological ascent, right? 1, God, Echad Eloheinu, 2, etc. So this is the part at the end that is my favorite. And let's start with Adir Hu. Rabbi Kasher, I don't know if you want to put the words up, if you even have them, or I should just cite the names of them. No? Okay, I'll just sing. Adir Hu. Adir Hu, Adir Hu, Yivne Veito Bekaro, Bimheira, Bimheira, B'yamenu Vekaro, El B'nei Beitcha Vekaro. Thank you. Now let's see, without glasses, if I can pull this. I'm using my amazing Arsher Zik Haggadah from Holocaust era. I wish I could show you the pictures, but I'd lose the page. Okay, let me see. Bachur hu, gadul hu, dagul hu, yivne veito bekaro, bimheira, bimheira, v'yamenu vekaro, el b'nei veitcha vekaro, adur hu, vatiku, zakai hu, chassid hu, yivne veito vekaro, bimheira, bimheira, v'yamenu vekaro, el b'nei veitcha vekaro. We're on the letter Tet of the alphabet Tahor. By the way I usually do all of these is start a little bit slower and softer, and they increase in volume and intensity. It's really a beautiful way to do it if you have a bunch of people with you, especially who know this and can add to the intensity as they grow. Tahorehu, yachidehu, tabirhu, lamudhu, yivne veito vekaro, bimheira, bimheira, v'yamenu vekaro, el b'nei veitcha vekaro, melechu norahu, Sagidehu, Ibne Veto Vekaro, Bimheira, Bimheira, Yamenu Vekaro, El B'nei Veitcha Vekaro, Izuhu, Bodehu, Sadikhu, Ibne Veto Vekaro, Bimheira, Bimheira, Yamenu Vekaro, El b'nei veitcha vekaro, kadosh hu, rachumehu, shaddai hu, tokif hu, yivne veito vekaro, bimheira, bimheira, v'yamenu vekaro, el b'nei veitcha vekaro. That's one of my favorites. Okay, so the next one, I don't know if we have it there, Rabbi Kasher's Kilo Na'eh, Kilo Ya'eh, and this is a melody that I wrote, and we'll see if I can remember it. Oh, wow, it's not even in this Haggadah, is it? Oh, yeah, there it is, in super small print, not conducive. Do we have it there? He's looking. I'll try to bring it super close here to my ailing eyes and see if I can pull it off. Nadir b'miucha bachur kalacha gedudav yomru lo lecha do Lecha ulcha, lecha ki lecha, lecha ki lecha, lecha af lecha, lecha Adonai hamamlacha, ki lo Yahweh, ki lo Yahweh, ki lo Yahweh, ki lo Yahweh. Can't believe I remembered that. Okay, let's move on to more familiar pastures. So, Echad Miyodea maybe is the most well-known one here. And for those who are still with us, maybe we've had some attrition here, I can't tell. I think the best way to do this, and there are a couple of variant but still related melodies, is to have each person responsible for one of the lines. So it starts Echad Miyodea, who knows one? Echad Ani Yodea, I know one, and that's always my line. And then there's a chorus part too. So then Shnayim Miyodea, then the second person says Shnayim Ani Yodea, then he says Shnei Luchot Abrit, first person. Echad Eloheinu, all together. Eloheinu, 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 Shevet Hashemayim U'Haaretz. Third, we all ask the question, Shlosha Miyodea, third person. You just do it, consecutively on the table. Shlosha Ani Yodea. Then he says Shlosha Avot, second person. Shnei Luchot Abrit, first person. It's great. And as you go toward the end, obviously there are 13 things, and it gets to be machine gun rapid fire. It's really exciting. You obviously want to go around the table first just to not force people who don't know Hebrew well enough to participate. But even still, if you can dole things out beforehand and show people transliteration, the tune is repetitive and they can learn it. It's a great way to involve people. I've seen tons of people who don't know Hebrew well really get into this one. So it's beautiful. I don't know if I'll do the whole thing, but let's. Here we go. Echad miyodea, echad ani yodea, echad Eloheinu, 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 shebashamayim uba'aretz. Two, Shnayim miyodea, second person. Shnayim ani yodea, Shnei luchot abrit, first person. Echad Eloheinu, everybody. Eloheinu, 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 sheba shamayim uvaretz. Shlosha, Shlosha miyodea, Shlosha, third person. Ani yodea, Shlosha avot, Shnei luchot abrit, Echad Eloheinu, 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 sheba shamayim uvaretz. Fourth, Arba miyodea, fourth person says, Arba miyodea, Arba imahot, third person. Shlosha avot, Shnei luchot abrit, Echad Eloheinu, 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 sheba shamayim uvaretz. So let's skip ahead. Let's go to, number 12, which is 12 tribes. And you'll see what I mean about picking up the pace and everything. Shnei masar miyodea, Shnei masar ani yodea, Shnei masar shivtaya, Chadasar kochpaya, Asara dibraya, Tisha yarcheleda, Shmona yemei mila, Shiva yemei shabta, Shisha kidrei mishna, Hamisha kumshei Torah, Arba imahot, Shlosha avot, Shnei luchot abrit, Echad Eloheinu, 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 sheba shamayim uvaretz. Final paragraph, Shlosha asar. You can sing with us if you want to right now. Shlosha asar miyodea, Shlosha asar ani yodea, 13 מידיה, 12 שבטיה, 11 כוכתיה, 10 שבטיה. Oops, I did it wrong. 10 דיבריה, 9 ירחי לידה, 8 ימי מילה, 7 ימי שבתא, 6 שרידי משנה, 5 חומשי תורה, 4 אמהות, 3 אבות, 2 לוחות הברית, 1 אלוהינו. Everybody, אלוהינו, 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 שבשמיים ובארץ. A little bit better with 13 groups of people doing that, but that one is worth investing the time. It's also worth telling people beforehand what their pole position is going to be so they could learn their part. It's really magical when you can keep the rhythm and go around the room and everyone feels the pressure to be in and not choke. There's always a choker or two, but it's funny. And that brings us, I think, to the final one of these songs, which is Chad Gad Ya. I really picked the worst possible Haggadah because I just cannot see these. These are like bonsai Haggadot. I just can't see any words. Is it me? Okay, so Chad Gad Ya is in Aramaic, and again, this is one of the ones which was not written for the Seder, but maybe is the quintessential song of the ending. Just these all tend to just show that everything comes back to Hakadosh Baruch Hu, to God, who is responsible for everything. We've all heard these kind of stories, not just in the Jewish tradition, but I think it's kind of a common, theme that you can find in mythology and whatnot, poetry. Okay, so Andrea at the outset played us a melody which is a klezmer melody, and I years ago arranged this kind of in a little bit. It's almost like if Donovan Leitch. Remember Donovan? Sunshine be softly on my window today. It's like the Donovan hippie version of this at the end when everybody's a little bit tipsy. It is on the Ikar recording. I hope that it is now up there on the website. If not, I will make sure that the music is there so that you guys can absorb some of these tunes tonight. Obviously, we can't teach them all in one session. I'm just kind of trying to put them out there. You hear what you like, and then you can go back, I think, to the website, reach out if they're not up there. I'll make sure they're up there, and you can learn them, including this one. And Rabbi Kasher, maybe you can stick up this text, because I'm gonna get closer, folks. Either I'm getting bigger, or these words are getting smaller. There we go. Okay, let's see if I can find a good key. Chad Gad Ya, Chad Gad Ya, Chad Gad Ya, Chad Gad Ya. The Zabina Ba, the Zabina Ba, the Zabina Ba, B'terei ay ay doy doy Chad Gad Ya, Chad Gad Ya, Chad Gad Ya. Zabina ba b'terei zuzei ay doy doy Chad Gad Ya, Chad Gad Ya, Chad Gad Ya. Ve'yata shundra ve'yachla legad Ya. Zabina ba, Zabina ba, Zabina ba b'terei zuzei ay doy doy Chad Gad Ya, Chad Gad Ya, Chad Gad Ya. Zabina ba b'terei zuzei ay doy doy Chad Gad Ya, Chad Gad Ya, Chad Gad Ya. Ve'yata chalba ve'nashach le'shunra de'achla legad Ya, de'achla legad Ya. Zabina ba b'terei zuzei ay doy doy Chad Gad Ya, Chad Gad Ya, Chad Gad Ya. Ve'yata chundra ve'ikal le'kalba de'nashach le'shunra de'achla legad Ya. Zabina ba b'terei zuzei ay doy doy Chad Gad Ya, Chad Gad Ya, Chad Gad Ya. Ve'yata nura v'sara
That's the magic of Hillel Tigay. You kidding me? You don't get that anywhere else. That song was both a traditional tune and sounded like some kind of Donovan Jane's Addiction mashup. That was really remarkable. That's why we keep him around, you know, and pay him the big bucks, you know. Okay. Anything else, Hillel?
I think that's enough music for now. As I said in Amadeus, too many notes.
All right. So that, like, we booked this for an hour and a half, which is more time than I usually think. It's, you know, we want to be online, but we're done early, which is great, which is all to say that we just showed you that, you know, we just dispelled a popular misconception, which is that the Seder has to last hours. Now, you can do this in an hour. You can do this in an hour. And my hope is that if you just do what we said, if you just the blessings, a little talking in the middle, a little singing at the end, but hopefully you have all the steps in place so that you could just follow this order and you will have done the Seder according to this code that the rabbis handed down to us. Okay, so that's it. I just want to take just a few minutes before we close and open it up for questions if there are any. And I saw one come in a few times in the chat, which is, whatever happened to Eliyahu? Where's the Elijah's cup? That cup is usually we acknowledge Elijah after Barech, after the benching, and we pour a cup for Elijah at the, you know, as we pour a cup for ourselves for the benching, we invite Elijah to bench, to say the blessing after the meal for us. That's one of the steps, Barech. And then there are various traditions around that, right? Like in my family, someone would go and open the door for Elijah afterwards. And then my father, I think my father would kick the table and then the cup of Elijah would spill over, but he would always tell us that, oh, Elijah drank from the cup. So there are lots of traditions around this. That's one question. And while I'm in explaining mode, I also just want to highlight that that song that Hillel just sang is so cool. It's in Aramaic, right? Which shows that it's pretty old because it is at least referencing a time when they spoke Aramaic. And the lyrics, if you were following them, they're very cool. Like there's the goat that my father bought, but then something eats the goat, and then it's like the house that Jack built, and then something. But at the end, right, there's the ox which drank the water, and then the shochet, the butcher comes and slaughters the ox, and then the last two lines are just like, you can see them really getting humorous because they're like, oh, but then the angel of death comes and slaughters the butcher. But then it's like the grand finale is, and then God comes and slaughters the angel of death. And it's a little gory, but it's kind of a cool play on who can beat the butcher? Only the angel of death. And who can beat the angel of death? Only God. So that's just, there's lots of cool stuff. We could go all night, but any questions before we close tonight? Anything that we didn't cover that needs to be clarified? Anything you wonder about that's missing here? Can't guarantee answers, but any questions? Not seeing any. Okay, let's see if anyone types anything in the chat they need to know. Okay, well then we're good. We did it. This is what we wanted to do, and we did it. Took you through the 15 steps of the Seder and a lot of the music that really stands at the heart of the evening as well. And I just wish you all ascension, right? Like I hope we noted at the outset that this whole thing is meant to bring us up, to elevate us with music, with story, with spirit, with ruach. So may we ascend 15 steps and get back to the place where we belong. This world is not where it needs to be. So let's try to elevate this world with our Seder this year. Thanks to everybody. Thanks to my brother Hillel. Thanks to all of you for joining tonight.
Rabbi Kasher, beautiful. I learned a lot. Yeah, it was great. Thank you, everybody, one and all. I'll miss you.
Good night, everyone. Who ends early? Come on.
Not me.
All right. Good night, everyone.
Bye.